Welcome everyone to this ACRL Presents webcast about our new report, Academic Library Impact, Improving Practice and Essential Areas to Research. We're really excited to have you here with us today, and we've got a number of speakers lined up for you over the course of the next hour. I'm Kara Malenfant, and I've been a staff member here at ACRL for a number of years, worked closely with the group that put out the call for this report and then gave some feedback to our wonderful colleagues at OCLC Research who actually undertook the writing of the report. First, during this hour, you're going to hear from me for about 10 minutes or so, kind of teeing things up for what led ACRL to want to commission this new report. Then I'll pass things off to Lynne Conway at OCLC Research, and she'll be talking about the methodology of this research agenda, specifically talking about one element that we found particularly exciting, which was interviews with provosts and other senior academic administrators. Then we'll pass things off to Alan Carberry, who is chair of ACRL's Value of Academic Libraries Committee, and he'll talk about some of the recommendations that came out of the report and what the Val Committee is thinking of those. And lastly, my colleague Sarah Guk, who's ACRL's very new program manager and is going to be developing activities that help ACRL carry this work forward for the next 2 years. We're very lucky to have her from a Mellon-funded position by the American Council of Learned Societies. So she's here for 2 years and is going to tell you what she's working on and how she's going to help the community next. So we imagine all of those remarks will take about 45 minutes. We want to make sure we try to leave at least 15 minutes at the end so that you guys can ask questions of any of us. This session is being recorded. We'll send you a link for that via email on Monday, and we'll also be posting this recording publicly. So, the road traveled. ACRL has been interested in questions around accountability, assessment, library connection to the priorities of their institution for really a long time, since the 1980s really. But more recently, about 9 years ago, the ACRL Board of Directors began to take an intense interest in these questions and really wanted to make a commitment to help librarians demonstrate the contributions they make to their colleges and universities. Partly this was in response to the general environment at the time, but also we had heard very loudly and clearly from ACRL members via membership surveys and focus groups that demonstrating and communicating the value of academic libraries was then and remains now a top issue facing the profession. So in 2009, there was a briefing paper and an invitational meeting to sort of figure out what we ought to do as an association to help the community. In fall of 2009, then, that meeting led us to issue a request for proposals for a comprehensive literature analysis. And we were very happy to award it to Megan Oakleaf of the iSchool at Syracuse University. Hopefully many of you recognize this report cover, which is available freely as a PDF online, or you can purchase it if you like print in your hot little hands. And so this came out in September 2010 then, about a year after the RFP was issued. The Value of Academic Libraries, a comprehensive research review and report, looked at the quantitative and qualitative literature, methodologies, and best practices that were in place then for demonstrating and communicating the value of libraries. The objective was to provide academic librarians with a clearer understanding of what research exists about the performance of libraries, where gaps occur, and to identify some of the most promising best practices and measures around library performance. After this report was issued in the fall of 2010, the following spring, ACRL adopted a new strategic plan. And one of 3 big goals was around the value of academic libraries. And a month later, the board charged a new standing committee, the Value of Academic Libraries Committee. So that shows kind of a little bit of the golden thread of the thinking of how we got there. This report was really a key work that spurred ACRL to continue down this path. One of its recommendations was that ACRL should create a professional development program to build the profession's capacity to document, demonstrate, and communicate library value in alignment with the mission and goals of colleges and universities. So in order to determine how we could shape such a program like that, we sought advice from a broad range of stakeholders. We convened a summit in 2011 with a collaborative planning grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And you can read more about that summit, who was invited, kind of what we learned in this report that's freely available online. We took what we learned from those summits and those planning conversations, and within just a couple of weeks, we applied for a follow-on grant from IMLS. This time it was a national leadership grant, and we were awarded just shy of $250,000 for the project Assessment in Action, Academic Libraries and Student Success. It ran for 14 months as an intensive team-based program, and it continues on today as a one-day roadshow traveling workshop. You can read a lot more about the Assessment in Action program on our website. There are individual reports from over 200 teams which participated. There's a synthesis report for each of the 3 years talking about what we learned from that year's group of teams. There's a special issue of the journal College and Research Libraries. And there's a forthcoming ACRL edited book, kind of a capstone commemorative about everything that happened with that program. So fast forward then to April 2016. Our Value of Academic Libraries Committee had done a pretty in-depth gap analysis, looking at the recommendations that were made in the VAL report, looking at the recommendations that were made in that summit planning report, looking at what progress had been made and what areas had yet to be addressed. And together with their input and at their great impetus, we decided to issue a new request for proposals for a new research agenda that would be an update on the progress since the publication of that 2010 VAL report. So the focus, again, was to look at important questions where more research is needed in areas critical to the higher education sector, looking specifically around institutional priorities for improved student learning and success. And then in August 2016, we selected a team from OCLC Research. And they have shared many updates on their work through virtual sessions, through in-person sessions. They've sought lots of feedback, lots of input. And we're just really, really pleased to be releasing the report, Academic Library Impact, Improving Practice and Essential Areas to Research, and the accompanying literature analysis dashboard. This new report is really a significant milestone in ACRL's Value of Academic Libraries initiative and for the profession as a whole. So at this point, I'm going to pass things off to my colleague Lynne Conway, who is at OCLC Research, and she is going to, was the lead of the project. She's going to talk a little bit more about the development of the report and kind of some of the key things that have come out of it. So let me pass the ball over to you, Lynne.
Thank you, Tara, and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're really excited about this project and what we've learned. And so I know we have a short amount of time today. I will try not to speak too quickly, but that's hard. So I will, let me start now, and I'll talk about, first of all, the data collection process. So what we first did was we decided to look at the literature because we wanted to know what others are talking about in the literature about academic libraries and their value. We also wanted to talk to those of you who are working in academic libraries. And so we had an advisory board of 14 individuals. And the 14 individuals were selected from different types of libraries. So we had administrators from community colleges, from four-year undergraduate colleges, from research universities. We also tried to have a sample from individuals from the different regions within the United States, and for secular, non-secular, private, and public institutions. So we wanted to have representation from the different constituencies in academic libraries. When we looked at the literature, we looked at higher education literature as well as the library and information science literature. We were geared very much to the literature published and directed towards North America. However, we did look at literature in the UK and in Australia that dealt with UK libraries and Australia libraries on the subjects of student learning and success, because many of them had done much work in this area and were a bit ahead of us in North America. With the advisory group members, they had to agree that they would work with us in an advisory capacity, but also to participate in a focus group interview and to also participate in a brainstorming session, a face-to-face brainstorming session. The focus group interview was done virtually. And then they also had to agree to review the documents that we had, review some of our recommendations, basically keep us on track, and to ask one of their provosts at their university who works in the area of looking at student learning and success, and ask them to commit to speaking to us in a semi-structured individual interview for at least an hour. And so that was a big issue and a big commitment to the advisory board members, but also to their provost. Some of the advisory group members said, you know, we wish we could have an hour with our provost. So this was, we thought, a very good start to our project and something that really contributed to the information that we learned. As I said, we looked at the literature indexed by LIS and/or higher education databases. We looked at the literature between 2010 and 2016. We also looked at the themes that came out in the 2010 Val report that Kara told us about, published majority in the US with some Australia and UK studies. And we also have a visualization dashboard that's interactive, and we have the literature in this dashboard so that individuals may go in and look at different themes that came out of the literature, look at the different data collection and analysis methods used, look at the different type of libraries, and pull their and add their own data and have a report that may be used to talk to administrators or colleagues in the academic institution. And Alan will try to give a little bit about that. And we also have some tutorials, YouTube videos about this visualization component. So as I said, we had the focus group interviews with the advisory group members. We had 14 advisory group members. 11 were able to attend the online focus group interview session. 3 did not, but they answered the questions for us. So they submitted their answers on paper. It lasted 90 minutes. We recorded, transcribed and we did not transcribe the notes ourselves, the recordings. We did have those transcribed by a third party. And then we input those and coded those using NVivo, which is a qualitative software package. We used a thematic coding scheme. So by that, and everything emerged from the data. So we did not sit down and say, we're going to use these terms. We read all of the transcripts, we came up with themes, then we developed the code book based on what came out of the discussion with the focus group interviews. We also looked at intercoder reliability. So the team members all coded the transcripts, and then we got back together to discuss how we coded. I was the last one to code, so we had 2 doctoral students from Rutgers University who did the initial coding. Then I came in and coded, and they were right on, and they were really, their intercodal reliability was very high. I came in and mine was not. And so we had to go back and start discussing and recode. So once we discussed and we were all on the same page, then the coding or intercoder reliability score was much higher. With the provost, as I said, there were 14 provosts. The interviews were about 45 minutes on average. We transcribed, had 9 of the 14 audio files transcribed by a third party. However, 5 of them were poor quality, but we had very detailed notes because as we interviewed, we also took notes. And so we used, again, NVivo for analysis, used that same coding scheme, and also practiced that, checked our intercoder reliability. Now, when you look at these themes, and these were the most frequently coded themes, you will see service 70% of the time, and this is with all of the documents. And so next, in the literature, next you'll see collaboration and learning in college. Remember, this is LIS literature as well as higher education literature. We also looked at the AIA reports, so we also coded them in this document file. The focus group interviews, remember these are the library administrators, communication, collaboration, and service. Provost, communication, institutional planning, and learning in college were the top themes. Now, when you look at this graph, you'll see that we're looking at the themes coded by the focus group interview with the advisory group members versus the provost interviews. And so the advisory group is that reddish bar. I think that's how it should appear to you. And then the provosts are more of the blue. You'll see communication is very similar. And then you see collaboration as it declines with the provost. Look at service. That's another one that declines with the provost. Institutional planning, the provost mentioned more. So these are just some things that come out. Look at accreditation. The provost mentioned it, but not very much. So the key differences are provosts discuss learning in college more than advisory group members. Provosts discuss space more than advisory group members. Advisory group members focus more on service than provosts. And advisory group members focus more on collaboration than provosts. So there's also a language difference that we noticed. Librarians use service, not only in the discussions in the focus group interview, but also in our literature. Provosts use more specific terms, teaching and learning, customer service, space. And so and this came out also in the higher ed literature. These are some quotes, and I'm not going to read them to you because we want to save some time for all of you to be able to ask some questions. But the thing that I liked about this quote, and this is from a provost, from a research university, secular, and a public university. And he says, the key to me in this is librarians have to be able to sell to the deans that this is something valuable that they want to be a part of. Because the deans have to think that this is worthy because we're all vying for the same dollars. And they have faculty talking to them, and the provosts have to look at the big picture. So what librarians need to be doing, or library administrators, is sell to the deans so that they get buy-in when it comes time for any support in any way or resources. Now, we came up with 6 priority areas, and again, Alan will go into more depth with these, but they are communication, collaboration, mission strategy and alignment, teaching and learning, student success, and learning analytics. And these came out of the literature, the focus group interview, and the semi-structured interviews with the provost. And we did a lot of back and forth with the advisory group. So I want to talk about the provost perspective. One of the things that came out was that critical thinking skills are really, really important. And they kept talking about developing an informed citizenry. And also for educating individuals, not just in academics, but for making lifelong decisions using information data. Now, I was a little bit concerned because my interviews with the provost were actually the day after the U.S. presidential election, so today, 1 year ago today. And I was concerned that my interviews may be skewed because this was a topic that was really discussed. However, my colleagues conducted interviews prior to the election, and this theme also came out. But it was very prevalent in the interviews that I conducted because I conducted them the day after the election and through that end of that week. So it was that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday after the presidential election. I talked to some of the provosts for an hour and a half, and in many ways I was a counselor to them, so I had to keep steering the conversation back to our questions. And this is an advisory board member and from a research university, secular private. And this individual is saying this whole kind of conversation around fake news is a good example of how important our critical thinking skills are on understanding information in our everyday lives and how important this is. This is a quote from a provost from a research university, non-secular private. And he says, people are talking about the problems of educating people to be citizens more. And he talks about this election. And he says this thing is a hard thing that we have to confront right now. And because his concern was that the administration wasn't going to think that education and making informed decisions with data and accurate information, credible information, was going to be important anymore. Again, this was one of the interviews that I conducted. This is also a provost, research university, secular private, and just saying that librarians have to play a role as a partner in facilitating learning in new and different ways. And again, to understand, to embrace information as critical for our everyday lives, not just for our academics or professional lives. Again, another provost, this is a college provost, non-secular private. And I really like this quote because he said, we should be helping people learn how to think, learn how to be skeptical, learn how to use critical thinking skills, learn how to be self-reflective. And that's how we as academics can tell our story, demonstrate our value. And so right now, librarians have an opportunity to align ourselves with institutional priorities and communicate value. But what we really believe is that we need to be using the provost language. Step back, look at their literature, use the language that the provost used, talk about contributing to the mission and the institutional goals of the university institution. And I like this quote from Brian Matthews from 2012 because I think it's very critical to develop relationships. And looking at the literature and how we as librarians and LIS researchers often dwell on and target service, we really need to be focusing on relationship building, communicating, using the language of our colleagues, our constituency, our administrators, instead of just looking at service. And this could make us stronger and be in a position to make a stronger impact within our institutions. So thank you so much for joining us today. I will turn this over to Alan now.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm waiting for the ball to come over my way. Just received. Thank you so much. So hello, everyone. My name is Alan Carberry. I am the current chair of the Value of Academic Libraries Committee. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time today talking about some of those future directions for research that have been identified within the Academic Library Impact Report. There are almost about 50 unique research questions identified within the report, and I'm not necessarily going to spend time on all of those, but I did want to give a sort of high-level sense of some of those research focus areas, as well as some of those research questions that resonated in particular with me. So as Lynn just mentioned, the Academic Library Impact Research Agenda identifies 6 areas of research focus. And within each of those areas, the report offers a few different things. It offers some effective practices to implement that sort of research focus at the local level in your library. It identifies a number of research questions requiring further study, and offers some suggestions on possible research design. The report also offers some examples of exemplary studies in that area, as defined by the literature analysis that the OCLC team conducted. So this report is really intended to be a tool that is useful for librarians and library staff and library administration as we're doing impact assessment work within our library. So the first research focus area, as Lynn mentioned, relates to our ability to communicate the library's value outside of the library and high up within the academic institution. That was language that really resonated with me, that high up within the academic institution. The report outlines that context really matters here in this communication, and that our message should focus not just on the services that we provide, but how they, as well as collections and space, impact student learning and success. The report suggests that there is a mismatch in terminology, as Lynn was mentioning, the terminology that we use compared with the terminology that our provost and other administrative officials are using in higher education, and thinking about how we should actively adopt that terminology by our stakeholders. The second research area focus asks us to match our library assessment to the Institute's mission. So the research agenda suggests a lack of practice-based research studies in the area of institutional mission and accreditation in particular. And I just wanted to pull out a line from the research agenda that again really resonated with me. And here it is. Higher education stakeholders perceive accreditation as a necessary task that the institution can accomplish with or without libraries. And so for this reason, library administrators and staff must communicate how they can contribute to accreditation standards and their importance in meeting these standards. And again, I think that that disconnect between what provosts are saying and what the advisory board were saying is an interesting thing to think about. And in what ways has the support by library administrators and staff of the institution's mission and specific goals affected student learning and success outcomes? So that is the second research focus area. The third research focus area invites us to consider ways in which we include library data in wider institutional data collection efforts. I think our profession is grappling and figuring out the issue of learning analytics right now, and I particularly appreciated the way that the research agenda asks us to consider both the application of learning analytics as well as the ethical implications of this. And I'm particularly drawn towards this research question here of how can library administrators and staff balance concerns about maintaining user privacy with the use of individual student data to measure learning and success outcomes. I think that is a really awesome area for research that we could be doing within our profession. The fourth research focus area relates to ways to quantify the library's impact on student success, and it places particular emphasis on diversity and inclusion as a major theme in this area. The research agenda invites us to consider the diverse experience of students and how those diverse experiences are impacted by things like library instruction, library spaces, etc., etc. And again, does access to library spaces support student enrollment? And again, thinking about those multiple perspectives is really welcome and a really interesting area of focus, I think. The next area of research focus is in the enhanced teaching and learning. And this calls on us to find ways to better communicate how libraries enhance the teaching and learning goals of our institutes, which I think many of us assume that we're doing good progress in this area. But again, I think the research agenda highlighted that provosts are much less inclined to associate libraries with providing teaching support. And so what are the ways that we can communicate outwards the work that we're doing in this area? I think the research agenda indicates that this is where we have some work to do. The research questions in the report also ask us to think about new ways of assessing these learning opportunities within the library. The next and final area of research focus relates to collaboration both inside and outside of the institution. And there is particular emphasis in this section of the research agenda on collaborative efforts within our local academic institutions and organizations, not just collaboration within our own institute, but also collaboration outside of our institution as well, all in efforts to increase student success and our assessment efforts that we're doing there. The research agenda focus area invites universities and community colleges, for example, to consider ways to increase and assess student learning together. I know in the research agenda they also invite us to think about ways that we might partner with public libraries to think about how the impact of libraries more broadly generally could collaboratively be explored. And again, Lynne also mentioned the visualization tool that is part of the research agenda, and I wanted to just take a moment to mention this dashboard element of the impact report. The dashboard tool is available at the URL that you can see on your screen, but this visualization tool allows you to explore the literature related to the area of impact assessment and library value, but allows you to create visualizations and illustrations to help you see trends and patterns within the research. And again, a big area that has come out of the research agenda for me is thinking about the context in which we share the information about library value and library assessment, and thinking about how that could be tailored appropriately and contextually to the audience in which we're delivering it. I'm particularly excited about the visualization tool to be able to think about ways to show and demonstrate library value. So this dashboard tool is comprised of many of the literature studies that the OCLC team used throughout their work as part of the research agenda. And again, it helps you visualize trends in impact data in a really interesting way. And so I think this tool is really useful if you are at the local level and you're wondering, you know, how many community colleges have looked at the area of retention within the library and how the library impacts retention. This tool is designed to not only allow you to see the trends in the publications in that particular topic, but also to actually identify some of those research studies as well. Also, a particularly exciting aspect of the dashboard tool is the ability to add in custom data, your own custom data, so that you have the power and the tools to be able to manipulate and visualize the data in a particular way. That dashboard allows you to do that. It allows you to import your custom data to see the trends that you're seeing in the data that you have. the Value of Academic Libraries Committee will continue to create and maintain this dashboard analysis tool going forward so that it can remain a viable tool, a useful tool, one that is helpful for practitioners who are doing research in these areas of focus outlined by the research agenda. So again, I just wanted to give you a higher level sense of some of the findings of the research agenda and the report, but I strongly encourage you to dig deep into that report. This again is intended to be a document that will guide your thinking and assessment work going forward. And I'm excited in particular by some of the initiatives that ACRL and the Value of Academic Libraries Committee has in the pipeline to help you do some of that work. And to tell you a little bit more about that is Sarah, and so I will pass the mic to Sarah.
Thanks, Alan. Okay, so as was mentioned, my role here is primarily in developing new programs that will bring this agenda forward and support the work that the Value of Academic Libraries Committee has been doing over the past several years. And the first of these programs is one that we were very excited to have announced just last week. So hopefully some of you saw that announcement come out. It's a travel scholarship program, and its goal is to support librarians and information professionals to travel to non-library conferences to present on work demonstrating the impact of academic libraries in the broader landscape of higher education. So these might be education conferences generally, also things like disciplinary conferences if you have, for example, worked with people at your college or university in a particular field. But the idea is to get librarians, people who work in libraries, to talk to other people in the higher education landscape. And it's based on the recommendation in this new report that academic libraries be able to communicate their contributions both to institutional stakeholders and outwards to other departments and other areas. So these travel scholarships provide up to $2,000 each to cover conference registration fees, transportation costs, accommodation, and meals. And it's for the current fiscal year, which per ALA ends on the 31st of August, 2018. So if you have a conference in mind that you've already applied to, or you see one come up in the near future, we would strongly encourage you to apply. Applications are due on the 8th of December. The full details are on the website at the link there, but briefly, the applications, we are looking for details about the conference itself, some details about your own background, a presentation proposal and statement about how it contributes to the Value of Academic Libraries initiative and to ACRL's broader mission and strategic plan. And you'll need to provide a brief funding proposal with estimated expenses, as well as a statement of institutional support. So just a brief statement from your library dean or provost or whoever you work closely with, saying that they support you going to this conference. So please look at the details on the website there. My email address is also there on the website, and there's a list of frequently asked questions. So if you have some question that comes up once you've had a chance to look through those, please do get in touch. We'll have a few minutes now at the end, I think, as well, to if you have any brief questions today. The other program that we haven't yet announced, but that will come up soon, is a series of research mini grants. And these are more closely tied to the Academic Library Impact Report, particularly to those priority areas that Alan has outlined. So the goal of this program is to support research in those areas. The exact amount is to be determined. They're relatively modest grants, though, so we're talking a few $1,000s, not tens of thousands of dollars. And we hope to get the announcement and details out about this program within the next couple of months, and to disperse funds by the summer of 2018. So if you've had an idea, or if this report has sparked ideas for research, definitely keep that in mind as something
to consider applying for going forwards. So I think we are actually a couple of minutes ahead of schedule, but we will just finish up. So this webcast has focused on the Academic Library Impact Report. If you haven't had a chance to do so already, you can download a free PDF online or purchase a print copy from the ALA store. And if you have any questions now, I think we will be happy to take questions. If you could just type them in the chat box, whoever the question is most appropriate for can respond.
So just while we're waiting on some questions to come through, I just wanted to just take a moment, actually, because I don't necessarily think we've done this in a sort of formal way, but I wanted to just take a moment on behalf of the Value of Academic Libraries Committee, and I hope on behalf of ACRL, or I know on behalf of ACRL, to just acknowledge the great work that Lynne and her team in OCLC have done. I'm really grateful for the sort of thorough and sort of robust way that you went around this project, and again, I'm really hopeful that that practitioners can really use this tool every day in the work that they're doing. So just wanted to formally sort of say thank you to Lynne and her team for all the great work that they've been doing.
And this is Kara. Let me just add my here to that. It was, you know, it's always one thing when you make a proposal and you think this is how it's going to play out, and then you get into it, and they just did a phenomenal job of integrating so much input and feedback and suggestions and just being open all throughout. So I hope many of the folks who are here now were able to read and comment in drafts and feel like they were responsive. I know I certainly feel that they were.
And well, you're welcome. It was really good to do this for us. It was very exciting, and I'm glad that we were able to work so closely with Kara and the ACRL staff and Alan and the BAL committee, and with those of you in the community. We had a lot of feedback on things that individuals thought we should change or they wanted to have more information about, and so we really were glad to be able to work with everyone, and it was a great experience. Someone asked, I see a question about how one enters their own data into the dashboard and how it's stored. And I think it would not be good to try to walk you through that now, but we have several YouTube videos that will walk you through that. And so I think that would be most helpful for you to look at those. And our, somebody wants the dashboard URL. Someone able to?
Yep, I just popped that into the chat, and I gave
good.
the specific tab that has the link it goes right to the tab where you can see those instructional videos. So there's a series of 5 of them that show you different features, and the one about importing your own custom data is video 4.
Okay. And I see a question, did Provost give any indication that they would be willing to push faculty to take advantage of library instruction and to assess outcomes? They did not necessarily talk about pushing the faculty, but what they did talk about was that the library staff, library administrators work with and get to faculty, and they did talk about that. So they weren't saying that the provost would take on that responsibility, but that they felt the academic library administrators and staff should do that. The provost did talk about, you know, working with the librarians and basically the library administrators to get information out, but they felt that it was something that the library administrators and staff needed to do with faculty. And again, I think that's that whole relationship building. One of the provosts talked about walking into the library and how excited he was that people were so active and involved and how many people were in the library, and talked about the whole space issue and what a wonderful space it was. And the advisory board member also talked about the day that the provost walked in, and then went to talk to her and said, "This is so exciting," and said that he frequently goes in there, walks around, gets a table to sit and work. And so this library administrator thought that this was the best publicity that one could have, to get the provost to just walk in one day and see what's happening there. Unfortunately, one of the provost who I interviewed had a very, very stereotypical image of the academic library. And that, I think, to me, was a big surprise, because obviously I know the advisory board member, and the advisory group member is not a stereotypical traditional librarian. And so I just thought, oh my goodness, this must be an interesting relationship, because all he could talk about, he was from the sciences, his background, his discipline, but all he could talk about was how the library dean needed to negotiate for online journals and the cost of online journals. And some of the other provosts talked about the library space as this wonderful place for engagement, interaction, teaching, learning, also for recreation, safe place for faculty and students. A couple of others obviously talked about the expensive real estate. That space is really expensive. What could we do with that space if we did not have, we weren't housing books? And so I wondered, have these provosts walked into those libraries in a while? So that story about the provost actually walking into the library and then seeing it as this lively, interactive hub, and he even used that word hub, of the academic institution. I thought, this is a great story. If you can just get the provost to walk through on his or her way to a meeting, that might be just what you need to get that buy-in.
So, Lynn, this is Alan. There are a couple more questions in the chat box, and I wanted to give you just a second to, if you get a glass of water, just give you a moment. And so I'm happy to sort of facilitate those. So, were there specific types of spaces and/or technology that Provost mentioned as useful? That's one of the questions is in the chat. And what are the barriers for libraries to build a relationship with different constituents of a university? And so I'll start, and maybe Lynn, I bet this is directed more for you, but again, one of the big aspects of the research agenda for me was speaking the language and the terminology of the various stakeholders and making sure that we are moving away from talking within our own bubble and telling ourselves how impactful we are with information literacy instruction, for example, and starting to speak in terms of the sort of the goals of not only our provosts and our institutions, but also what are the goals of faculty. Presumably they have goals related to teaching and learning, and how are we able to sort of contextualize our message based on the goals of our faculty and our provosts. But Lynn, I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to say more about what you heard.
And I think that that's one of the major things that I would suggest that that's one of the barriers is that I think one of the things that came up a lot was time. Okay, none of us have enough time, and so it takes time to build a relationship. And one of the things that we thought of, we recommend is, you know, even if you're in the coffee shop and you see a faculty member or you see, you know, students who have been in the library, strike up a conversation. And we had examples of librarians actually enrolling in classes and, you know, being students in a class to, you know, get that engagement with students and faculty. And, you know, I just can't stress this enough. It takes time. I know we don't have time, but it may be time spent very well. And again, I mean, take every opportunity you can. I mean, someone on the advisory group said, you know, I was walking from the parking lot and the provost was there. And so we just started talking, and, you know, I had a few things that I wanted, you know, him to know. And so I rattled them off. And, you know, just to have and be prepared. You know, it's that whole, I know it's very trite, but it's that whole elevator speech. Be prepared, because you don't know where you're going to run into someone. But it's very important to become involved, contact some of the faculty. Some are going to be more apt than others. I mean, some faculty may say, we don't have enough time, da-da-da, it's not important. But, I mean, we all know that one of the other important factors is, you know, it's that whole time of need. And so if there's a big project, or you keep getting students asking for some help for some paper, I mean, that might be the opportune time to go to the faculty and say, you know, I'm hearing this, what can we do to help you, that type of thing. And to be collaborative, that's another thing, to be on the equal playing field, that you are integrated in the teaching and learning. So I think that's one thing. I thought there was another question. What were specific types of spaces or technology that Provost mentioned as useful? You know, technology did not come up a lot. We were surprised at that. You know, I think we just take it for granted now. The spaces that came up, I gave you some examples, were the spaces where you have that collaborative teaching and learning, where people were making things, doing things, but also having some private space, some quiet space, but that the activities, that hub, I think that's what really hit me.
Thanks, Lynn. So Mike just left a comment. As a regional library system, our membership includes academic, public, and school libraries. This report reflects in striking ways the challenges faced by our colleagues in all three library types, especially school libraries. We'll be sharing this report with our member academic library directors. That's awesome. I'm so glad that it is a tool that stretches beyond just the academic library community. And again, that was another thing that struck me, that the importance of collaboration and thinking a little bit differently about the holistic approach to thinking about library impact.
And that's, I'm glad that this was brought up, because in our research, my research area is, I'm the director of user research at OCLC, User Studies. And we've been collecting data on individuals and not just academic participants, so not just undergraduate, graduate, and faculty, but also with what we call, you know, the general public. And what we have heard, we've been collecting these data since 2003, and we often ask some of the same questions. So we have this longitudinal warehouse of information, and we hear that many students, whether they're secondary school students or college university students, will still use public libraries. And I think that's something that we as academics cannot forget. And one of the things we also learned is secondary students, if they have a school librarian who they feel comfortable with, or a public librarian who they feel comfortable with, even as they progress through their educational stages and become college university students, they may still go back to that school librarian or to that public librarian. And it's good then for the school and public librarians to have relationships with the academic librarians so that they are able to collaborate and refer. So that's something that I think we have to remember, and it's very important.
We do have a few more minutes, but I don't see any more questions coming in just yet. So while people are typing, I'm going to pop into the chat the link where you can go, if you haven't found it already, to either download the PDF or to purchase the report in print. It also includes links then to the dashboard, so you can get back to that easily. But we don't need to sign off just yet. If people still have questions, by all means, go ahead and type them in. We've got a few minutes left, and happy to address any concerns you might have.
I'd like to also mention that when we completed the report, I sent an email to each of the provosts separately and copied the academic library administrator at that institution who was on the advisory group, and sent a link and sent an executive summary and said, thank you for contributing to this work. We couldn't have done it without you. And several came back and said, thank you so much. This was great to read. It was really helpful for us to understand what's happening in libraries and the differences and similarities between our literature and our comments. So I thought that was something that gave me hope. Well, I don't see any other questions. I think we have about 3 minutes. But
yeah, I don't see any others either, so I don't know if Alan has any last remarks, or if Sarah does, or Sarah does, or if we should go ahead and thank folks maybe. Any last comments from Lynn or Alan or Sarah?
This is Alan. I would just add that I am especially excited about the forthcoming opportunities, so the travel scholarships that Sarah just popped into the chat box, and the forthcoming research grants to allow ACRL members to actually dig into some of these research questions. So look for those opportunities coming really soon, and yeah, strongly encourage you to think about making use of some of those incentives in your work.
And we might want to mention also that ACRL has been very good in wanting to promote this work, not just within the library and information science community, but in the higher education community. And so Alan and I will be doing a discussion roundtable in January at the AACNU conference. So I think that's really good too, that we're getting out there.
Absolutely, and we're very excited that Alan and Lynn are able to get out there and talk about this report, and we're looking forward to having all of you be able to get out there and talk about the work you're doing at your own libraries and how that connects with all the important directions that we're learning from the reports that we all ought to go forward to in our profession. So thanks everyone for joining us today. We'll send a recording around on Monday, and it will be posted publicly on the ACRL website. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.